All right. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited for you to join the Beehive. Today, I got Nicole, and we are going to be having a conversation which we call SME Suite. And today, it's all about AI-driven, becoming an AI-driven campus. Everyone's talking about it. And we really believe that we got to think more than just it as a technology, that it has to become an enabler for the way that campuses really need to transform. But, we came up with this, and Nicole's going to lead this and moderate this conversation. So, Nicole, go ahead and introduce the world to you, and why did we decide on this topic?
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. I'm excited to talk about this today because, like you said, when it comes to AI, it's less about technology per se. We know that that's ever evolving, ever changing. In the higher ed context, I really think it's more about mindset. What mindset do campuses need to embody in order to embrace this technology and keep the humans doing the really amazing work of serving our students front and center? So as a strategic activator, using a very skills-based role here at Beyond Academics, I always want to think about the human-centered approaches to these new advances and what it means for us as people, right? Because that's the only way that we're going to embody this ourselves is how does this affect me? How does it affect my job? How does it affect the student and our campuses at large? So really excited to dive into this with everybody today. Please drop your name, where you're from, your institution, or where you're joining us today in the chat. We want to hear where y'all are from, some familiar faces, give some shout outs. And if you have any questions along the way, because Matt and I are a very conversational group, we want to bring those questions and comments to the stage. This isn't just a canned presentation where we're going through 6 questions. This is really dynamic. It's engaging. We want to see where the conversation lends itself, and that means your voice matters. Oh my gosh, thank you, Carlos. So please feel free to type in the chat at any point during this discussion, and we want to highlight your voice as well.
Yeah. So, as we think about this, one, we want it to be interactive. So if you are going to put things in the comment, we'd love for you to join us on stage because it is all about hashtag your voice matters. Because I think a lot of times when you come into presentations, people are just gurgitating a spin of some sort. And maybe we don't have the right answers. Maybe you have the right answers. And so we're really driving it. So let me just kick this off by just showing the slide that we really should be talking about. And we talk about this, and this slide is, where has your campus been? Let me just remove this one banner brand so we can get that out. So which era does your campus come in? And we like to start this conversation because this is really important, because as we think about this in the early mid 80s, there wasn't a lot of technology. It was very manual, very telephone. And we as gatekeepers, we managed the offices. And a lot of it was just an elite mindset. As we went into the middle 80s, into the 90s, we started to become more computer driven. You started to see mainframe. You started to see Scantron. But we were just computerizing what manual things did. And then we just adopted it as a part of the action. And then when we went to internet, we started to think about it in terms of dispersing information throughout a campus. So you started to see more transactions being computed. You started to see institutions being managed in a more centric way. But we were still doing the same things that we did manually. And then we went into mobile. As the iPhone came into play, we started to see the software vendors going into it. They started to use mobile as a thing. But we still operated the same way. We enrolled students the same way. We registered the students the same way. Then, of course, cloud, which was supposed to be transformative, was really brought in as a transformative thing. And we are still doing the same thing. We just had moved our servers and stuff in the cloud. And then the ad tech vendors, they just recopied the SISs and the ERPs of the world, and we're still doing the same thing. Then you're now starting to see automation come into play, and now we're in the era of artificial intelligence. And if we continue to do what we did in the past, we're not going to get very far. We're not going to do much more than what we did in the 90s. And yet today we live in a much more competitive world. So when we think about artificial intelligence, we got to think about how do we make everything frictionless, personalized. We're starting to drive a different conversation. And let's not do what we did in the 90s when we didn't have a really good technology. Let's start doing what we should be doing. And we're really driving that too. So Nicole, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, I think this is a really great visual that sort of sets the table for today's conversation, because while we have the AI era for higher education starting in 2023, spoiler alert, AI has actually been around a lot longer than the invention of ChatGPT. And I'd love to welcome our featured panelists, because I see in the chat people are asking where they at. So I'd love to bring them up on stage to introduce themselves, but also answer the question of what was your first experience with artificial intelligence, so that we can all have a more informed approach. So I'll start kicking it off to Joe.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, probably good evening, everyone. I see a couple of folks from, I think, India. And Art, nice to see you here. So it's kind of cool to see people, familiar people here. So my name is Joe Sabado. I go by he, him, his. I'm from UC Santa Barbara, the deputy CIO. And I think, as folks familiar with me on social media and other engagement, I'm the kind of person that's really curious about, the technology and what does this mean to the world. And I'm part of the UC systems effort to bring AI to the campuses. Also at UC Santa Barbara, the co-director for the UCSB community of practice, AICOP. So I was thinking about the question you posed, Nicole, and I'm thinking, do I even know when AI was being used on me? It's like, instead of me using AI.
Right.
But to the extent that I could think about, I went to college about 1990s. And I'm thinking, okay, 1994 was when I started doing some computing, right? IRC, those kind of things. And maybe the web, like the search engines, probably used AI back then. Very simple form of AI, maybe. But I think the one thing that I remember is the Clippy. Remember the little office assistant?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
The little pop-up? I still
Yes.
remember that. So I'm thinking, is that like a first version, or maybe
of the chatbot? Yeah.
Chatbot. So that's my story.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Thank you for bringing the nostalgia of Clippy on his little piece of paper coming in the side of our word processing. That's amazing.
Well, I'm old, but I'm not that old. You said nostalgia.
I'm like, that's my first computer memory. But let me kick it over to now Vistasp. Introduce yourself. Tell us your first memory of AI in your day-to-day. Oh,
you're on mute.
We have a mute. Check that off the bingo card. You're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that.
There you
Hi,
are.
everyone. I'm Vistasp Karbhari. I'm a professor of civil engineering and mechanical and aerospace engineering at the University of Texas at Arlington, where I served as president from 2013 to 2020. So I come at this from two different perspectives. I come at it as a perspective from a faculty member, where my first use of AI was probably back in 1991, at least the first use that I thought was AI, unlike what Joe talked about, where, yes, it could have been AI, and we just didn't know about it. And that was with the use of cellular automator in my research. So when we really go back to it, it's been around for years and years. It's just the change that has allowed us with Gen AI and LLMs to be able to, quote unquote, talk to it or communicate with it much easier, that everyone suddenly become aware that what we used to do with Siri or anything else was using AI. And so it's not new. It's just far easier for us as the general public to use it and not have to code.
Yeah, really great point. Now we're able to have that back and forth with it. So it feels like very novel and new, but like you said, it's actually been around forever, even back to Clippy. So appreciate y'all introducing yourselves. I know we have folks from NJIT in the room here, and we are missing our fifth square. So just wanted to acknowledge that Ed is unable to attend today. Unfortunately, COVID won today. So he is not here. So let's all send him well wishes, give him a shout out in the chat, because I'm sure he's tuning in, watching from home. And also, as this kind of came up, right, because you make a plan and the universe laughs, I wanted to kind of throw this out to our panelists before we really dive in. What do you think, in your opinion, is a bigger wake-up call for higher ed specifically? Was it the pandemic or is it AI? Do you have any thoughts on those two? Because certainly for me, with the pandemic, it was like we had to change, right? We had to change our delivery methods. We had to really wake up and realize that student perceptions were changing and what they needed, more on demand. We kind of got that shakeup. And now with AI, we're seeing, whoa, we're doing so many things manually that could be automated. Rise of personal over personalized. It's not just insert first name here and it's personalized, right? Now they know everything about you. So do you have any thoughts on these two major advancements for our industry and how that affects where we're headed?
You want to take it with steps? Go ahead.
Sure. I think it's an interesting question because I'd lean towards AI because we saw it happen much faster, in the sense that far more people got involved in a very short period of time. I mean, if you look at the time it took for 1 million users on, let's say, Google, or 1 million users for the internet when it first began, or email, it took a much longer period of time. If you look at November 2022 and 1 million users from there in a very short period of time, I'd lean towards AI, but I'd also say that this has been something that's been happening over a period of time. And I think for higher ed, the real question is, when did we realize that we weren't answering the question of value?
Oh,
And that's the point where things have started to change. It's been slow,
right.
but it's been building up. And I think COVID and AI would just sort of accelerate as catalysts for us to understand that that question was there in ahead. And has been there for a while. What is the value we provide, and to whom are we actually providing that value?
The value awakening. I love it. Any other thoughts from the group before I focus us back in?
Joe, you have thoughts?
I do. Actually, let me just share something, because it kind of goes back to Nicole's question earlier about how to frame this conversation. And I think I was thinking about COVID and then AI. This question really does come to mind for me. Is like the intersection, or just the personal and the societal and the work that we do. And so framing in that perspective, has a bigger impact, COVID versus AI. For me, it's really hard to say that, because again, it's personal. I mean, I think it's societal. It's global. But looking from this lens, how do you view AI nowadays? I think the question is, what is it what we're trying to do with AI? Because it does have impact. And as we think about, how we do things in higher education, let's not forget that we're not an isolated, entity here.
No.
And there's a crossing between and I kind of adopted this framework called sociological imagination. It's kind of adopted that in sociological term. But I think about that in terms of, COVID and AI. And it's like, how does the personal intersect with the societal impact? Because again, we got here from some place, sometime. We're here. The decisions that we make, the things that we do, will impact the future. And the intersection of the individual and the society. To me, that's the question that I frame this, like, COVID versus AI. That's the frame that I look at it.
Yeah, I like that.
I think when we think about AI, we have to recognize that higher ed, it will only change when external factors make it change. So COVID was certainly an external factor. It made us think differently, but it kind of rubber banded back, because the purpose of it was still to educate, in some way, right? But I think AI is going to be somewhat different. It's going to be similar to the way the internet has changed the way we live our lives. I see I see AI coming into play in three different parts of campuses. One is the learning enterprise. We're really going to be driven by changing the way that we educate. So that was something that COVID did. But we also are going to start to look at the academic enterprise. When we think about our SISs of today, they all talk about AI, but they talk about it in and one of my colleagues said this to me was they talk about it as it's in their product. And the reality of it is it should become your product. AI should become the product to enable you to do something different, right? The internet made us do something different because everything we do in it is around the internet in itself. And I think one of the things we're going to really look at is the third element is the campus enterprise, is the experience that we're having on campus, and how does the life cycle of that student, whether it's a housing, whether it's being at a ballpark, whether it's being at a football game, whether it's figuring out what your fraternity and sororities are doing, AI is going to become a part of creating a connected campus in a much different way. COVID just kind of pushed us to more technology enabled it. AI is going to change the way we operate. And that's when we start to really drive a different conversation.
Okay, well, let me build off of that really quick. So now if we're saying that AI is going to change the way that we operate, are we truly creating AI-driven campuses, or are we looking at more AI-enabled campuses? And I want to kick this off to Joe because I can feel he's got some strong thoughts on this.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. This is a conversation we had a couple of days ago when we were preparing for this. I did not question the term that y'all come up with, AI driven versus AI enabled,
Oh, you questioned it and it was okay.
Yes, yes. When it came up, but I think it comes to mind the idea of data driven versus data enabled or data informed. And so the question about, like, I think Cheryl was commenting on it here about human touch. How do we position AI? Is it a tool? Even the whole concept of the ethics and the guardrails we put together, right? Is AI just a tool, or is it to enhance human beings, or is it some tool that replaces us? And so to me, maybe it's nuance, but to me it's a big deal to say, are we an AI driven campus institution, or are we AI enabled? Because to me personally, that means quite a bit. Because if we're saying AI driven, it's like, are we at the mercy of AI? Maybe I'm being very kind of on the extreme side here of interpretation.
Yeah.
Or are we more of, this is still a tool, but at the end of the day, people come first, people come last, and people come in between.
Yeah. I like to think of it as like a supporting factor or a tool in your tool set, because as we'll get into today, like AI is only as good as what you put in, right? The outputs you get depend on what you're putting in there. And I think Vistasp, I'll turn it over to you if you wanted to comment on the AI enablement or even some of the inputs, right? And the
Sure.
outputs.
I mean, to me, so let's start off with the last comment you made about data. It's garbage in, garbage out. And we just have to remember that AI is a tool. At the back end of it, there is code and there is data. Whichever way we put factors and weights and anything else on it, when we actually train the data, at the end of it, there's data going in and somebody who's put together a framework. If that framework does not structure it the way we want, it's garbage. Even though that data might be very valuable to somebody else, it's garbage to me. And therefore, what I'm going to get out of it is also going to be garbage. If I keep that in mind, we cannot be driven by it. It has to enable us, because it has to be something that we do purposefully and with thought. And that means we have to have thought in how we structure it, how we make sure we validate the data, which is something that universities are horrible at doing. Sort of ask any university whether it has validated data right now for any data set.
Oh.
And if they're truthful, the answer is going to be, I don't know.
So much distrust of data in higher ed, of their own systems.
Absolutely. And when we go to AI, that becomes the crux of it. So enabling to me is a much better word, not just because that's where we should be. AI is a tool, it's not a person. We need to be in control. Human agency has to be there, but because we need to design it and we need to check what goes into it. And so going back to what Matt had talked about earlier, we need to design it for what we want it to do,
Right.
rather than what we've done in the past with all these systems where we've said, here's a system, let's take a square peg in a round hole, round peg in a square hole, and fit it in. With AI, we've got to be a little more careful and purposeful about it.
Yeah.
What's our
And,
purpose for its use?
and Nicole, I just brought Trent up. Welcome, Trent.
Welcome, Trent.
Welcome.
Welcome to the
Hello.
show.
Thank you.
And for the folks that are joining us, as you noticed, we invited Trent up because Trent is putting some really good comments in our comment section. Plus, he said he'd love to join us when we invited him. So you can do the same thing. So if we invite you up, come on up and give us some stuff. But Trent, this is the first time you're in the Beehive. We have never seen you before. So welcome.
Likewise.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I like the opportunity. Great topic as well.
So what is your thoughts on
Um,
generative AI and the impact for campuses and things like that?
yes, well, I've been using this for, let's see, my phone is actually ringing just as I'm about to speak here. Let's see.
Your friends are calling saying they can see you.
So yes,
You're phoning a friend.
possibly, quite possibly. But I've been making some short courses with it, experimenting with it on my own. And I've been a career coach for about 12 years at this point, and I've worked in a number of organizations, and I can clearly see a lot of the benefit of the tool. I also see some of the potential, not drawbacks, but I think there's a way to use it where it doesn't do all of the work for professionals, especially if working with someone who is a student or a job seeker. These are the folks who I've also supported. Employers want to know that the work that they've done is authentic. And so there has to be some kind of middle ground or balance between using the tool and then also demonstrating authentic work. I think for universities, what instantly came to mind was the amount of volume of student activity. When I was in college, way back when, I remember meeting my career advisor one time out of 4 years, one time, and that might be a common occurrence with students, especially if the campus is large. So I'm just thinking about if the coaches or the advisory teams at those institutions understood how to use artificial intelligence, the generative kind, they could become more efficient. They also can instruct or teach or guide their students on how to use the tool as well to handle some of the fundamental activities, very basic resume support, cover letter support, a lot of the areas that could be done independently. While the more advanced work, the more strategic work, the work that would require an advisor.
Yeah.
Exactly. It would require more time spent with that individual. That can be done minus the AI. Also, it could be done in tandem. So a coach could be with the learner or the client or the student and show them how it actually works. What I've also discovered about this tool is that because it is not autonomous, it requires someone to prompt it. So the originator of the thinking, it has to come from the individual. So it leads me to think about, I just wrote a newsletter piece about this this week. It requires the creativity of the user. So the creativity of the user must be cultivated to use the tool properly. Hence why we don't want to offload our creativity totally to the system.
Trent is getting into one of my favorite topics, which is future of work, soft skills, and how we bring those to the forefront with AI in the background. So
Can we throw this to Vistasp?
Yes.
Because I think Vistasp, being a professor, and then having the conversation about AI, the first thing, there's so much fear in that it's going to, students are going to shortcut. They're going to try to, I'd love your take on, is there a way for AI to be used in a way that really helps with the goal is competency, knowledge, right? It isn't not, and I always say we live in an earn it world versus a learn it world. We should be in a learn it world. And the reason that we're all afraid of people cheating is that everyone's trying to earn a grade. And we should be trying to earn the competency that professors like you are teaching. How do we address that in a very positive manner that AI will help you with competency not necessarily I could write the paper, I can get the easy exam, I can cheat. How do we change that?
So let's take it two ways. Now, is that AI or is that a real cat walking across?
This is not a deep fake. This is my real cat.
So, I mean, let's take it back first just to put the context. Whenever we have new technology, and it's gone back centuries, we've been concerned about it, whether it was the Gutenberg press that was going to bring an end to all scholarly work, or it was the calculator that was going to stop everyone from being able to do anything that was mathematical, or the World Wide Web. It's been the same. So I think we just have to ride that part out. But in terms of the context in which it can be used, I mean, let's look at what AI could do for us. We've always said in education, whether it's higher ed or it's in schools, that the best education comes when you have one-to-one engagement. In fact, Bloom has the 2 Sigma sort of rule, and there's a huge theory behind it that shows that if you have a tutor, your performance is going to be so much better. But if you go further from that one-to-one engagement, we know from our own experience that if we learn something enough to be able to talk to someone else and teach them about it, our understanding is going to be much higher and much better than if we just tried to sort of memorize it. AI provides us mechanisms of making both these things happen. It also democratizes knowledge. Right now, we've been driven in a world where if you had money, if
I
you had
love
the resources,
Yep.
you had the tutor. You
Right.
had a parent who has gone through college before,
Right.
and therefore you can talk to them. And those who don't have that background are disadvantaged because they didn't have that construct around them. AI shifts that completely, especially if you combine AI with AR, VR, and XR.
Yeah.
It suddenly opens the thing that what we've always talked about in a scarcity mindset. We can only do so much because we're restricted. That gets blown out of the window. And to me, that's the real thing we should be looking at. It's not whether we cheat or not. We've always cheated.
Yeah.
It's not
AI
whether it's
has
going to.
not changed.
It's not. It
Everyone's
hasn't
cheating all
changed.
the time.
Absolutely. And we've got to look at it as a way where it completely changes the way we look at it. We've always talked about the Socratic method, and it's great and it's wonderful, and then said we can't do it. Well, today we can. The question is, are we willing to change our complete structure to enable what we really wanted? Knowledge on demand and learning by everyone when they wanted, as they wanted, and in the mechanism that best suits them.
Mic drop moment right there. That was a really thoughtful reflection. Thank you.
How do we change the operational world, right? Because if you think about it, people who are leading higher ed learned the way that they're trying to teach higher ed today, right? And of course, if you only know what you know, if you believe that, hey, this has gotten me to where I am, hey, this has gotten me to the place that I need, and this is how everyone else should learn. Is higher ed going to change operationally? What is the way of altering the path that goes to what is that things are accessible? We have anytime, anywhere, personalized. Like we expect that in our Amazon experience, our Starbucks experience, our Uber experience. All of that is there. How do we bring that to campuses? Either one of you can take it if you want.
Yeah, Matt, I think I like Vistap's kind of take on how do we, maybe you didn't say it this way, but personalize, how do you scale that personalization and how do you meet people where they are? And I'll tell you this, maybe it's a controversial question, but I do a lot of research on the conversation about AI, but when I see about assessment, and cheating in AI, and my question is it more about the learner? Is it more about questioning the identity and the profession of the faculty, right? So because learning happens everywhere, right? I grew up in student affairs. So we don't say, oh, using AI to cheat for example, career, the career advisement that Trent talked about. We don't talk about folks using AI to help them with their lives. But within the classroom, we talk about cheating and assessment and what does that mean and banning AI, inside the classroom. So to me, it's more about, is it AI that's now questioning the centuries old of the profession? You talk about like the gatekeeping in Gutenberg Press, and then there's a history behind that, but like there's always a gatekeeping involved in the process, right? There's coffee shops in Paris and different like institutions, like those are seen as not scholarly discussions. Social media at one point was, what, that's not even valid. And so AI now, again, as a tool, is that is a question more of that. It's questioning the tradition of the higher ed institution and the profession of teaching.
Do you think we AI, with the struggle to transform any campus, is the variance of the definition of the purpose of higher ed? Because different purposes will dictate different things, right? If you ask traditional academics, they don't believe that their purpose is to create the workforce of the future, right? They believe that they are there to disseminate knowledge. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that there's different purposes in the way that we look. So it's hard to define what AI will do if your definitions aren't aligned in the manner that AI can do it. So if you're saying we only disseminate knowledge, then okay, AI has to go help that, right? But if we say, hey, we got to help the workforce of the future, then AI needs to be redesigned a certain way, right? So I would love your take on those kind of conversations in terms of, because I believe all of it plays a role in how we architect AI.
So let's go back with a historical context as to why higher ed came about. So higher ed came about, if you look at it way, way back,
Mhm.
for the second son of landed gentry,
Yep.
because the second son either went into the priesthood or became the learned scholar, because the first son got all the land. It was meant for a very exclusive population.
Mhm.
And we expanded that. And we said, okay, that exclusive could become a little more inclusive. But it was really meant as a way of taking a group of people and giving them knowledge for the sake of knowledge, which is great. We then transformed that a little bit, especially when we came with the GI Bill and everything else. We changed that with our disciplines and everything. That really came from Harvard years ago when they changed from this overall education thing to saying you could have electives and therefore you could do something else, which is to get more faculty involved. And then we changed to our disciplines, but we stayed with that. It was knowledge for the sake of knowledge rather than knowledge for a societal or social purpose of social mobility. If we change that construct now and we say that the goal is not just to make everyone knowledgeable and to be a learned citizen, but they also need to be gainfully employed. And I'm using those terms very carefully because there is a legal connotation and a political connotation to gainfully employed. So I'm going to say gainfully employed, meaning they've gone through education, they're going to be able to do something with it that enables them to uplift their own lives and those of the family and the community around them. If you take it from that point in view, we have to start questioning, what is a degree?
Mhm.
Why do we have 120 credit hours? Why must everything be done in a classroom from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening? Why is it that 20 years ago we said that those who went to night school were wonderful and we applauded it? And today we say, you've got to finish in a certain period of time, irrespective of what you're doing side by side. Why is it that we've always thought about traditional students rather than the student who exists today, which is a large amount of people who are with some college, no degree? Those who need to come back to be, use whatever word you want, reskilled, upskilled, new knowledge. That's the population. We keep talking about the enrollment cliff. It's because we're looking at the wrong demographics. And I think this is where we need to start looking. It's not AI that we need to look at. We've got to look at what is our purpose. And with that purpose, how can AI help us get there better and faster?
Right.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what you were saying about value. Like we are in this value deficit right now, and these big changes are making us come back to that question and look at it hard in the face and say, what do we do about this? So how can being AI enabled create value for campuses, or even just leveraging the wealth of data that they have in a perfect world, right? All of these characteristics about your student body, the questions you're asking on forms over and over and over again that you already know. It's just in some back office system process, not connected, siloed, and everything else. How can being truly AI enhanced create value for a campus? Are there any examples you're using, working on, strategizing today that would apply across the industry and bring us all up to speed?
Yeah, if I could answer that one,
Please.
I think there's a concept called a job to be done, right? I forgot his name, Clayton Christensen, right?
Yes.
And so to look at the lens of what our value, what is that? So students, they come to college for a reason, right? What is that? Is it just to get knowledge? Is it to get education? But every student come to college for a reason. Staff, there's a reason that they work at university. What's the job to be done? So applying the concept, what's job to be done? How do they accomplish that? Now, how do we do that with AI? I think I see three major problems. There's a lot more, obviously, in higher education, but the concept of time poverty, first one comes to mind. When you have those marginalized, low-income students spending hours, and we saw this before COVID, by the way, and we addressed that. Financial aid. I look outside, and there's like four stories of students waiting for financial aid. And it's just the same students that need more time in the classroom are spending their time waiting for administrative offices. For what? For 1 minute of conversation? So that's time poverty. The other one is staff capacity and competency. I mean, this is one of the things that we always talk about, like, let's not use AI. On the other hand, how do we scale? And again, it's not so much replacing the human beings, but like, how do we focus on the things that matter? People, relationship building, strategy. And AI then can kind of take on the mundane task.
Mm-hmm.
Third piece is institutional ineffectiveness. There's a lot of waste, and I think that's where data informed decision making come into play. Because again, we look at what we see. You have AI who can kind of of course, with guidance and all the things that we need to put in guardrail, it can provide context beyond what we can see.
Right.
So again, it's like, how do we get to the defining job to be done, as Vistasp said? What is that purpose? And again, students, undergraduate researchers, faculty will have our own jobs to be done. But how do we make sure that that's what they're focusing on?
Sure. Let me add to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, I see this as, in addition to what Joe has said, I see four things, some of which overlap.
Mhm.
The first is access at scale.
Mm-hmm.
If you really look at it, we restrict ourselves to saying we can only be so many students because.
Mm-hmm.
And we turn away highly qualified students. The second is rapid response. And Joe alluded to that. We have a student waiting for something and they wait sometimes weeks, not just minutes. Let's take transfer credits. Where a student waits for transfer credits to come through, and by the time the school has said yes or no, they've already finished the semester.
Yeah.
They've repeated a course, or they've gone down another track. There are things that could be done much, much faster because we can use technology. I'm not going to say AI, I'm going to say technology.
Sure.
In a way in which we can actually reach decisions as long as there's traceability and there's explainability behind it, so that we can do that. The next part is basically moving away from an assembly line. We've taken it to higher ed and we've made it an assembly line. One size fits all. Even though we all know that within a classroom, we have at least 3 different sets of students. The very bright students are the ones who've already studied something. They're bored, and a lot of them fail or flunk out because they're bored. Then you have the ones that need a little bit more assistance. They're not dumb. They just need a little bit more assistance because they weren't prepared previously for what they have to catch up on.
Right.
And then you have the middle, and we tend to teach to the middle. This one size fits all mentality has to change, and AI will make us change that. And then the fourth is context. How do we provide context to the knowledge that we're providing rather than it just being data and information that we're throwing to people so
Mhm.
that they regurgitate it? We talk about critical thinking, we don't teach it. Think
Yes.
about what AI, AR, VR, XR would do. If you took a student and you said, okay, I'm going to place you in the Civil War, and I'm going to let you think about the context of the Civil War at that point in time. Or I'm going to take you to Baltimore just before the barge hit the bridge
Mhm.
and let you figure out what were the decisions that were taking place at that point in time.
Hmm.
Or take you to Los Angeles or Santa Barbara at traffic time and say, what do we need to do to solve this traffic problem? It's no longer a abstract question. It's now something they're living and learning. Those are, in my mind, that's what it takes. It takes away barriers, it takes away constraints if we use it the right way.
Right.
Yeah. And I'd love to dive into some really tactical applications too, because I know Joe, from following you on LinkedIn, you're actually like walking the walk. I mean, we all are here on this stage, walking the walk and talking the talk, but you developed like a CIO dashboard of analytics. You're building websites in real time, all of these things that you had presumably never done before, but are pushing yourself to use and embrace AI and then be a teacher for all of us to absorb and feel confident and secure in doing it ourselves. So can you touch a little bit on some of those really tactical applications of how you've been toying with AI, just so we can get a little inspiration?
Really quick, and before Joe goes, I think that the point that you just made, Nicole, is really important to understand.
Yeah.
In order to change, you need to have a mindset like Joe, who's willing to think through it, right? Because there's a lot of lights on CIOs, deputy CIOs in the house, in market, where they're just trying to make sure that the lights are on, which is needed. I get that. But you got to wear a hat similar to what Joe is wearing. What does it mean? So if you listen to Vistasp, he's laying out the architecture of where we have to go. And that's from an academic that's on stage, right? But then if you think about the things Joe is thinking about,
Yep.
it is thoughtful in realizing the purpose has to change. And if you look at his chat and comments, everything is about building a community and serving that community in a different way. So I just wanted to, before I wanted to give you that. I think it's really important, Joe, for people to recognize you have to think this way in order to create something. You can't draw, otherwise you're painting by numbers. I can't tell you the number of CIOs I walk in and they're painting by numbers because a vendor told them to do something, or they saw some other peer doing something. And I realized you're not the same institution, and you're following the same roadmap. You don't even serve the same student. So sorry, Joe, I just wanted to give you that before.
No, it's good. Thank you for the introduction, Matt. So, and just from a tactical perspective, I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I've done. I mean, real quick. One of the things that I was thinking about yesterday about, it's like we have all this data in front of us. Okay, that's what, but what's missing, right? Now what? So what, right? And so for me, just I can show you this number. This is my staff's capacity and demand. So, we can see just anecdotally where they're spending time on. But when I put this on ChatGPT, says, give me some context, give me some, additional information here. It automatically just in seconds did this. So now I can have conversation with folks who are not so deep into the numbers, right? Some people are numbers, some people are just more contextual. And I can even kind of make this an executive summary so that when I'm having conversation with the higher up folks, that I can have a conversation without delving into much to the numbers. Another thing that I did was I was curious about what is the things I'm learning in ChatGPT, right? And so I downloaded the data that I have. And
This is from your personal use?
Yeah.
This is amazing. Can we all just take a minute to look at this and say, wow.
Yeah, I get, I anytime new technology comes around, it's like I get so immersed into it. But you can tell now, it's like, the usage that I have. And what's interesting to me is like, okay, there's the numbers, right? But what are the things that when do I spend the time learning and thinking about ideas? And by the way, yes, I don't sleep. So that's one thing that
I was going to say, when do you sleep?
Yeah, it's a bad thing to do. So please, folks, don't follow that. But that's just me my entire life. But this is another one that there's no way just myself that I've been able to do this, right? And I'll tell you this: I have never coded, and I'm making it a point that I'm doing all this prompt engineering, but it's about the idea, right? And so, yeah, I can code. That was my past life, but I just don't have the time now. But to be able to say, based on these numbers, give me the time of the day and what days of the week I'm spending my time on ChatGPT. Wow. So this level of analysis. The other one that I did was I developed this IT professional mentorship program, kind of led that. We don't have the staff for it, right? So I'm the one leading it with a couple of people. And so I used, this is like our last year, and I used ChatGPT in many areas, right? So again, just crafting the survey, solicitation of emails, forming questions, matching the mentors, mentees, getting the data, matched up. So this is one way I've been using that: code development, communication, survey, even just putting some rubrics, right?
Wow.
This is another one where we had a symposium, and I got this API with Qualtrics, and so now I'm able to kind of analyze, what's our attendance, who's attending what session.
Wow.
This is another one I did with Claude 3.5 that just came out. So I used the higher education reference model and the EDUCAUSE IT catalog, and I said, okay, so develop a dashboard for a CIO, and it developed this PRD, they call it, and I fed this with Claude, and I said, develop a dashboard out of that, and this is what I came up with. And you can actually kind of click on it, and I can feed more data, and it's working. So yeah, those are just some of the things that I've been using.
All right.
My jaw's on the floor. Can we just talk about mindset, growth mindset, and how you've never done these things before, but you are pushing yourself to embrace a new technology, learn everything about it. And you're not just ChatGPTing, right? You're using Claude, you're using all these other tools, you're mixing and matching. The more you're learning, the more you're helping to shape and inspire others that would have been scared of these. Personally, I'll say I only use ChatGPT because I don't even know the capabilities of the other ones yet, right? It's not relevant to my life in the way that now I see how you're thinking about it, and I can then internalize and use it for myself in that way, because we only know the art of the possible, right? We don't know the art of the possible because we're so focused on the day-to-day that this helps open it up for everybody else to benefit. So I appreciate
Thank you, Nicole. But here's the thing I want to make sure that people understand. It's this is technology, is a new way of kind of doing development. But here's what I'm because I learned so much all my career. For example, I can do a prompt saying, write this code. That's different from saying, write this code in a logical way in modular and using object-oriented programming, because I've learned that through my career. And so that's where I think the context, the familiarity, the expertise happens. You can only, the prompting matters, and that prompting comes from experience. Because I can say, write a dashboard, with this color. That's different from saying, write this dashboard for this purpose, and I want you to write in this architectural manner. Those are two different outputs.
So one of the things so Joe, what you did is amazing. So that is all about using AI for analytics, to think about the numbers, to react to, right? The direction that AI is going with the large language model, LLMs, right? And the RAGs, the retrieval augmentation generation, where it becomes very personalized to it. So we technically could create an LLM with a RAG model, which I'm being a little techie here, where it becomes just data of a course. And then you start to let AI become its tutor on that. Or you could be an advisor that is advising on, I don't know, journalism. And the data for that is very specific to the journalism industry in terms of that. So as we think about LLMs and RAGs and everything else, we're going to see two things. One, data is going to be a very important element, and schools are going to have to use it to become very strategic. But we're going to use data in a very personalized way. to serve students much more differently. And that's a huge part of how we will think about AI. As much as, all these technologies are like, oh, we could use AI. That's just to make you efficient. It is not teaching you to become more effective in
To
how you
transform.
work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to be cognizant of time. We have about 10 minutes left with the group here. Maybe a final question from my standpoint and wanting to absorb the knowledge of this group, and then we can transition to any lingering questions and mingling with the audience a bit. I would love to know from this group, if you were to fill in the blank with, by the end of 2024, by the end of this year, AI will blank. How would you answer that question? And we could take a minute to think, because I know I threw a little curveball.
It's a very simple one. AI will continue to stump people who don't want to really change.
So let me put it two ways.
Please.
One, Nicole, you'll start using ChatGPT, and you will realize that you could have had this conversation with ChatGPT and had about the same answers without the three of us. And you could really have had a conversation, not typed out, but spoken, as though you were speaking to Joe, me, and let's say Matt. That's number one. But number two, I think it's going to be like any other technology. There's a lot of hype, and most technology never reaches the panacea level or the destructive level of where people think it's going to be. Unfortunately, it's going to be making some changes. It's going to catalyze us in some areas, and in others, we're going to be where we are. Unless there is, just as Matt started out with, some external force that causes us to change dramatically.
That's good.
This is an end statement of Vistasp, because you're right. I mean, I can learn a lot. In my personal learning network, I learned quite a bit from online. But what I really enjoy about learning like this is it's this concept called personal learning network, right? What's the core of that? Person.
Yeah.
And so I can learn a lot. I mean, I've read 5,000 books in my life, right? Yes, that's knowledge. But where I really find value in this conversation like this, like I'm looking forward to meeting with Art in person, because he's one of the people that I just really follow. Every time, folks, follow him, because every time he posts something, it's like, how'd you find this? And how, all the things that like he's just kind of curating. It's like, wow, it's amazing. But to me, that's the value of having like a community connection, because personal learning network, the core of that is person. And so again, we can learn knowledge first, but like it's the intuition, it's the community. That to me, that's what I crave, and that's why I continue to engage with folks from different, places, different levels.
Yeah, and that's why I pushed back when Vistasp said you can have a convo with the AI. You don't need us. I'm like, I don't.
Yes, and I did say yes.
Connection.
Yeah, but keep in mind, you need us so that the AI has the data of our previous conversations.
Right.
So it's going to have this conversation because it's already in its quote unquote knowledge bank, if you will.
Right.
Okay. Now I see what you mean. It's like saving up for this moment.
There you go. So you didn't have to figure out when the three of us were going to be available. You could just do it at 1 o'clock at night when you couldn't sleep and you needed something to put you to sleep.
Well, unlike Joe, I sleep my full 8 to 9 hours. I am not staying up all night on these platforms.
Well, I sleep 4.
Oh my gosh, that is scary to me. I couldn't imagine.
I think by the end of 2024, there's going to be a deeper conversation about how do we really transform organizations. And I say organizations because I don't necessarily think higher ed is going to change in 2024. But I do think like consulting firms like us and others who are really focused on it, and there are a few of them that are really focused on it, I think you will start to see their way that they advise and consult is going to be more than just technology. Because right now, technology is what everyone is consulting on. And that isn't really, putting in a software isn't going to change you. No. It is being able to change the way you operate. In our consulting arm, we are changing the way that we produce deliverables, the way we do analysis, the way that we put a project plan together, right? There's no reason why a university office, whether a foundation, whether the admissions office, the advising office, the dean's office, they should be starting to think about using all the innovations that's in front of them, even starting with ChatGPT or cloud or whatever it is. But you're going to have to get people who believe that they can do it. So Joe's doing it, using it. And I think we'll start to see those people in 2024. And those are the ones that you'll start to bubble up.
Yep.
And I believe it. And then you'll see a bunch of people just left behind. They're going to be on stage talking about the latest SIS that they put in ERP. And you realize they're not doing anything more than regurgitating what we've done in the past. So
well, we realized that years ago.
we realized that years ago. But I do think that 2024 and 2025 is not going to be people just telling us the same thing, the shills of the world telling us that what they're selling. We got to really start to make an impact. We had a conversation this morning in our personal chat, and it was about help automating the accreditation process. Mm-hmm. And I said, folks, we can go and automate all that. It isn't going to change a university. So we shouldn't be working on automating a accreditation process for a university, because in the end, the impact is going to be the same. They're going to follow the same accreditation model, and we're going to be there. I said, but if we're going to go help the accrediting body rethink how they accredit and how they think about career trajectory, that's a job we want to go do. And I think that's the difference in the way that we think about AI. If your AI is just to make you more efficient to do what you do today, you're just going to be a little bit better in status quo. But if you start to say, are we going to make impact?
Yep.
Where does that impact happen? AI will help you do that.
Yeah, and I would piggyback off that. My response based on today's conversation, just everything I've learned, I've read, etc. I think by the end of 2024, AI is going to help us realize what makes us uniquely human and position us, as Vistasp alluded to earlier, position us to bring value back to the forefront of every conversation. It's got to come back to humans providing value, services providing value. At the end of the day, we got to focus back on value, not just efficiency.
But and this is an end statement, right? So value is the eye of the beholder. And
True.
A piece that's missing in this conversation is that we talk about value from what lens? Institutional would say, oh yeah, this is what we value. But when the students are not seeing that, I think that's where the disconnect. So to me, Matt, you asked earlier, how do we change higher education? One, is include the voices of those folks who have been marginalized. Bring
Yes.
the people who have not been there. Talk to our students, and incentivize the things that will make us change. For example, professors, right? What are they teaching? What are they incentivize? Research, right? How many faculty really want to do lectures? I'll be straight up. Mm-hmm. And it's not because personal, right? It's because what incentivizes them to be at the university, to be tenured.
But Joe, I think we have to be careful there again. We're talking about a subset of the university population,
sure,
that you and I come from, that does research. Mm-hmm. We have a huge number of universities and colleges where research isn't even thought of.
Right.
Sure.
And yet we're not meeting value for those as well, because we got focused on the institution,
right,
and the people who run the institution, rather than the people who are supposed to gain from what the institution brings to them.
And that's my point. Is like, we gotta talk to the people that we serve. And I think there's a proverb somewhere where, like, I don't know where this came from. Can't cut a person's hair when the person's in the chair.
Well said. Very well said.
In fact.
I don't know where it came from. Abraham Lincoln, social media. I don't know, but I thought it was.
And you see that Art made a comment. This is a first of many conversations we're going to be having, right? So the Beehive is just a new model of how we're going to engage. If you notice how we've engaged with all of you, either through chat, people coming on stage, we're bringing up some of the best thought leaders. We're going to have deeper conversations. So follow us on LinkedIn. Follow us. Just connect with us in our Slack. But I think there's going to be a lot of really good conversation. I know we're almost at time, and I personally want to say thanks to Joe and Vistasp for joining us. We always have really good dialogue, sometimes off stage, but I think it's an important conversation that we want. So and of course, Nicole, doing a great job in moderating. But we also want to thank both Ro and Gabrielle for doing a lot of the moderation behind the scenes, because that is also a big part of making the Beehive a really good community for us to engage with. But I'll let you close it out, Nicole, and take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what everybody has been saying, this has been an enlightening conversation. I really appreciate your time and energy, especially on such an important topic. We've only hit the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much more that we could dive into on this, and plenty more to come. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, Vistas. Thank you, Matt. Thanks to our production team behind the scenes and everybody that tuned in live and will be watching this on a replay. It's been great, and we hope to see you in the Beehive again soon.
Yeah, look for us on the YouTube channel. Just look up Beyond Academics. All of this will be streaming, and just follow us, because we will start putting a lot of different sessions out there. And we hope to see you in person at conferences and maybe on your campus. It was good having you all.
And maybe even a barbecue, as Joel just put in the chat. I would love to have a barbecue. If you're going to EDUCAUSE, we'll be in San Antonio, so maybe we got to get a barbecue going. So
Fly through DFW, and you can all have it here.
There you go. We just got an invite. We just got a good invite. So sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.